Hi, and welcome to episode 35 of the ChessTDD series. This time around, I'm back to my normal recording rig, which is good, but there is a landscaper or something somewhere outside lurking around doing something loud, so my apologies in advance if you hear that. What I'm doing here is fixing the naming that I left off with last time as a mistake. I started calling that origin, but after a minute I realized what had actually happened was that the first parameter was destination and the second parameter was really origin. That's not good. We certainly don't want to leave that in place. Right now the first one is ambiguous and the second one is wrong. So I am going to fix the naming there and also reorder the parameters. I did something that sort of made CodeRush choke, or I don't know what happened, but I messed around with this for a minute before I figured out that I needed to reload CodeRush. I don't know. Tried Visual Studio's thing here, and that made me uncomfortable. That probably would have worked, but whatever. Anyway, it gives me a chance to talk about and underscore how important naming is. You're probably watching me do this and thinking like, yeah, that's not good. You should change that. But some of you out there might be thinking, is that really worth going back and addressing? I mean, who cares? It's done. All the tests are green. In my opinion, it is absolutely positively worth going back and addressing. This will absolutely confuse whoever reads it next. It sooner or later will be the source of bugs when someone's modifying the get moves from method or whatever. This is a ticking time bomb in a very minor way in the grand scheme of things in life, but sooner or later that will create a bug if there isn't one already. So absolutely go back and make sure you get the naming right. So moving on, the next thing I'm going to do is implement the feature for night moves. And as I was typing that, I don't know if you're familiar with the Bob Seger song. I had to stop myself from continuing to think of that. Night moves. Anyway, it was a little bit of, again, I haven't been at this too much lately. I'm thinking of batching up a few episodes in a row here now that I'm kind of in the flow of things, but there was a bit of figuring out, once again, how the features work, and I'm not overly familiar with Gherkin and all the proper idioms, kind of feeling my way through it, basing what I'm doing on what's worked, on asking people questions here and there, and just kind of stumbling. So as an interesting aside that I didn't plan on, I started this as a series about how I would design something and use TDD to get there. And now you're watching the process of me learning something as I go. So take that for whatever it's worth. I don't know if there's a valuable lesson to be learned there or not. I consider myself a fairly good learner, but I will let you be the judge of that. So I'm going in here and I'm going to talk about a knight in its beginning position. And right now I don't have an incredibly methodical approach to what I'm testing in terms of acceptance for these different pieces. It's going to vary a little bit because of the different nature of movement of the pieces, but for knight, I was thinking off the top, and let's see if I remember this correctly now that I'm not staring at my own implementation again. I think I wanted to test the basics of a knight just kind of alone on the board, and then I wanted to test the knight possibilities in the actual beginning of a chess game, both from the black player's perspective and the white player's perspective. And then I think I wanted to get something in there with capturing, as well as let's just put a knight in the middle of the board and make sure it has access to its full suite of moves. So what I'm doing here is relying on the copy and paste crutch. As you've heard me say before, I kind of like to type things out by hand to force myself to feel the pain of the duplication. I'm not really doing that here because of almost my own ignorance. Excuse me. I don't actually know exactly how much duplication I even can eliminate. So I'm kind of adopting the copy and paste with this particular thing just because I don't know if there's gain in the pain of typing it out by hand. I'm not saying there isn't. I just honestly don't know. And so given that I'm erring on the side of not making you watch me type these grids out by hand every time. Okay, so there we're testing a move of the knight in its opening position with like no other pieces. So that went well. It should be able to move to 3 different locations in exactly those 3 locations. And that was a success. So now the next thing up is I want to test, okay, if we have the whole like white half of the board, let's make sure that these 2 knights can only move to 2 different squares each, which is what's possible if you're staring at move 1 of a chess game. So I'm going to use and in this one just to eliminate as much redundancy as I can. So basically a knight in its opening position, and there are 2 of them, so I used and to indicate that in the then portion, I guess, acceptance criteria, so to speak. I do not know the terminology, admittedly. My apologies. So when we have a chessboard with all the white pieces set up here, and I'm really enjoying how visual this is. I think that's a great addition. So it's pretty easy. You can picture this in as much as you'd be able to picture anything. This ASCII representation is a big help. So given the white side of the chessboard being set up, the knight on the left should be able to move up 2 and over 1 to the left, or up 2 and over 1 to the right. So that's going to be represented by 1, 3, and 3, 3. And hey, that goes green. That's good. So next up, I'm going to say, all right, now let's, through the and, let's add in acceptance criteria here for the other knight. So the knight at 7-1 should have the moves, I believe we'll say 6-3 and 8-3. So I think here you're watching me. I wasn't able to decide here whether it was actually like faster to copy and paste the thing from above and tweak it, or to just type it out by hand. If I'm going to keep sticking commas in there, it probably would have been faster to copy and paste. But anyway, feeling my way through it, and I'm feeling somewhat buoyed by the fact that all of these tests are going green. So, you know, with everything else here, I've been driving out more bugs than I would have liked via these acceptance tests, which is certainly valuable, but it's good for the old confidence every now and then to see that there's actually a bunch of functionality here that I didn't get wrong in the first place, or at least not have a chance to get around to. But, you know, forget about that pride, because that's really what you do with the whole test-driven approach. You're driving out your mistakes. You're approaching this and saying, I am not going to get all this right from the beginning. That's why I do things this way. I'm going to try my best. I'm going to screw it up, but I'm going to keep going with my suite of tests here, preventing me from having regressions. And, you know, systematically, I'll find all the things I haven't gotten right yet. So here is a nice addition to my repertoire that I hadn't thought of up till this point while doing this, is to use the insert cursor mode, or whatever you want to call this. So now I don't have to type the 2 characters and then hit backspace twice. So that was a pretty nice win in terms of efficiency, I guess. Take what I can get. So it's, you know, still a little boring to watch me type this out. It was interestingly at this point that I started to think maybe I can give these more common boards names. So like I have a white side only board, and I have a fully set up board. And I put a card on the Trello board to the end here, or toward the end of this episode, where I start to speculate, you know, maybe we can have these predefined boards. So instead of saying when there is a chessboard set up as, and then show this, I can say when there is a, you know, standard starting board It's kind of a trade-off there. I love the visualization of this, but I don't like all the duplication. I don't like that a thing that'll probably happen is I take this here and I just copy and paste it over and over and over again throughout all of these features and scenarios. So thinking on ways and actually reaching out to people a little bit to get ideas for ways to fix this. But for now, I want to learn my lesson from what happened with some of the other acceptance tests driving out bugs and say, hey, I hit problems, when everything was good for the white player, but then because of stuff I was doing deep in the code, when I went and tried the same thing for the black player, it didn't work properly. So player 2 here is critical. So what I'm doing is saying like, hey, let's look at these knights on the other side of the board and make sure that they behave as expected. And I was honestly kind of half expecting them not to. But so far, so good. So the piece at 2-8, the black knight to the back left there works properly. So now I want to check the one on the right to see that that one also works. So I'm going to say that this should have exactly the following moves. And for this one, it's going to be... let's see, 6-6 and 8-6, I believe. And we'd expect to see that go green. Now with that in place, the next thing I want to do, yep, there we go. So this is going pretty well so far. Now I want to just plunk down a piece in the middle of the board and make sure that it has, let's see, what's that off the top? 2, 4, 6, 8. The knight ought to have 8 moves if it's not encumbered anywhere by the side of the board. Oh, you know what? I probably, now that I think about it, I probably advanced one of these pawns. And another thing I thought to test here before I get to the unencumbered knight in the middle of the board, I wanted to test that a capture move was counted as a move. So I'm going to take this black pawn at 6 and I'm going to advance it all the way to directly in front of the white pawn at 6-2. So with the black pawn at 6-3, the knight to the right should still have 2 moves. It should still be able to go to 6-3 and to 8-3. So I want to make sure that it's not somehow discounting the 6-3 move because there's a black pawn there. And I suppose I didn't actually test this scenario, but it might have been beneficial to then move up the white pawn and test that it was blocked. But I think that's kind of a lower priority thing, given that the white pawn at 5-2 is successfully blocking the knight. So we already have a decent test of that situation. So good to see that it goes green. Capture is available for the knight, so excellent. And finally on to the last scenario here, which is the white knight just kind of in the middle of the board. So I'm going over to this other file and copy and pasting. And this is, it's in the back of my mind now. I don't know this tech very well, but I do know that it's a smell if I'm kind of moving around and copying and pasting things. As I said, there's a trade-off here in that sometimes if you're doing something specifically to offer up visibility and be very explicit about that, you might wind up doing some duplication or copy and paste because those are somewhat competing concerns. Like if you think about it in this scenario, if the goal is to show the board each time and then show for a certain piece what's available, it only makes sense that you're going to duplicate the board because there's going to be a lot of testing you do with the pieces all in their initial positions. So if you really want to be explicit and visual, you kind of live with that duplication. If you want to eliminate the duplication, you kind of lose out on the visual. I think a reasonable compromise here would be to have some of the more iconic boards defined as, stock things, like given a chessboard or when there's a chessboard in the standard beginning position. I think you won't lose too much in the way of visualization. People will understand what that means. But I'll play with it going forward, see kind of how I feel and what feedback people have. Okay, so now I am going to go through, and I was looking at this and thinking off the top of my head, okay, so what moves would there be and how best to list them? Somewhere early on when I was actually implementing knight at the unit level, I think I probably went through this same exercise. So assuming the knight's at 4-4, these are the various moves, and you can see I kind of got into a groove. Once you've got a couple, it's easier to be symmetrical about it. Now, if you're paying close attention, you should expect that when I get done here, this test will still be red. I didn't make any mistake in the code, and I didn't make a mistake in what I expected. I made sort of a counting error here in terms of the actual board, so it took me a second to figure it out, but you can see me counting by hand with the cursor. This piece is actually at 4-5, where I've put it, not 4-4. Of course, what I realized after making that slight correction is, oh yeah, well, I've listed out all the moves for 4-4, so it'll probably be easier just to put the description of the piece back to what it was and then move the piece instead of going and changing all the different board coordinates for the acceptance. So I'm going to put the piece where I actually claim to be putting it and then expect that everything goes green, and there we have it. So unlike previous episodes, I'm going to wrap up here at what I consider to be a good starting point instead of trying to cram another couple minutes in and then getting lost down a rabbit hole. I'm going to end on a high note where I wrote all these acceptance tests, and the only thing that went red is when I screwed up writing the acceptance test. So I moved implement knight moves feature over into the done column, and I'm going to go here on the Trello board and make a note, as I said earlier, that I'd like to define maybe at least starting board, just so we don't have a lot of duplication going forward, because I think it's going to be pretty common to say, okay, let's start with the standard board and see what moves are available. I can think in like every piece's feature that we ought to be testing, like what moves are available on the first move of the game. Might not come in quite as handy with certain other types of boards, but, you know, if we were really going nuts with this thing and we defined all kinds of openings and stuff and we're targeting chess players maybe. So I'm going to commit this here up onto GitHub. You can, as always, go grab the code or take a look or whatever you want. And that's it. I'll wrap up, and we'll start next time maybe exploring what we can do, making the standard board a little more defined, and probably moving on with queen, I think was the next one. So sync up and call it a day. I will see you next time.